Thank you for joining me on 13 Plus. I'm Cali Lichter, and this is On the Docket, a weekly recap of crime and court in and around the state of Michigan. This week, what court documents have revealed about Grand Rapids' first shooting death of the year, and how a Rockford preschool teacher took nearly $250,000 from her school to line her own pockets, and an extended breakdown into the sentencing of a 20-year-old who hit and killed a man while driving drunk and high at 6 a.m. All of that and more is On the Docket. A week after charges were dropped against the former Michigan State Police sergeant in the death of Samuel Sterling, Sterling's parents talked for the first time about a judge's decision to dismiss the charges against Brian Keeley. The court ruled Keeley, a former state trooper, had immunity from the charges. Our Lauren Baker sat down with Sterling's parents, who say one day they'll have justice for their son.
While talking about their son, Samuel Sterling, you can see how much Dad Michael Sterling,
I was his Pee-wee coach, and I just love watching him play football.
and Mom Andrika Cage.
He used to play a lot of sports. He played football, he played soccer, he played wrestling. Oh, he was an all-star.
Just love their son.
He'd just come up to me and just be funny. Samuel was a lot of life. He was a part of me.
But even in that moment of joyful reflection,
I try not to get emotional because I don't really like to talk about us.
reality sets in quickly that their son
That bond that me and my son had, I would do anything for him.
is no longer physically with them. More than a year after their son was killed after he was hit by former MSP Police Sergeant Brian Keeley in a police chase, a judge dismissed federal charges against Keeley, a decision Sterling's father says he saw coming.
When we was in the courtroom, how the way they was presenting everything, making him look bad, and making his officer like he was just some kind of big hero for doing what he did.
His mother, however, left in shock.
I was devastated. I questioned God for a good 3 hours.
But that questioning of her faith turned into her trust in her faith.
If I give up everything, and I refuse to do that.
That one day she will see justice for her son.
I'm standing 10 toes down for everyone, not just for my son, for everyone. Because this is just not my son. This is the community's son.
A man is now in custody in connection to Grand Rapids' first shooting death of 2025. 26-year-old Keith Tett is charged with open murder and 5 gun charges. He's also being charged with an habitual offender charge. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what Grand Rapids Police Chief Eric Windstrom told me about the case before a suspect was in custody.
For the first time this year, a man's life was lost to gun violence in Grand Rapids.
There's no, statistics are no comfort to Montanez's family, and that's just a fact.
Grand Rapids Police Chief Eric Windstrom says on May 23rd, the victim, identified as Montanez Lowe, was outside a bar on Wealthy Street. Windstrom says an altercation inside the bar likely carried onto the street where Lowe was shot and killed. Early investigations show he was the intended target. And even though gun-related homicides and homicides in general are down in the city, Windstrom says one life taken is too many.
So much because Montanez's family will never get that closure. They'll never be comfortable with what happened and okay with what happened. I'm sure they will think about him every day for the rest of their lives.
Windstrom also says this death was avoidable. In Michigan, it's illegal to carry or use a gun while under the influence.
So much because Montanez's family will never get that closure. They'll never be comfortable with what happened and okay with what happened. I'm sure they will think about him every day for the rest of their lives.
He says the suspect may have not had this gun legally either. While a life was taken, Windstrom believes Grand Rapids is moving in the right direction.
Realistic, I would love to be talking about how this is the only person that we lost to gun violence this year. And all it takes really is for the city of Grand Rapids to stand up and recognize that we don't want to be that city that is numb to gun violence.
He hopes the community can move in the right direction by not only working to stop these gun deaths, but also speaking up if they have information on what happened that night.
Because we know there are additional people that were out there that haven't come forward yet. and it's the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, and it's important to help to get those answers for Montanez's family.
So we now know that Keith Tett has been charged with the murder along with those various other charges. He was denied bond, but we were able to get our hands on the court documents to find out what led up to the shooting. I know when I talked to Chief Windstrom, he talked about some of the details that we now know more information about, like the altercation was inside the bar, it was a targeted shooting. You may ask, why couldn't he just say everything that we were able to find out from the court documents? Well, I like to say, law enforcement has their jobs and we have ours. Whenever a case is active, it's incredibly hard to get every single detail without getting those official court documents because it's an active case. It's still ongoing, it's still investigated, but now we have the court documents which shed some light on how the shooting started. The documents say the Grand Rapids Police Department responded to a shooting outside Billy's Lounge on Wealthy Street, where they found Lowe with a gunshot wound in the abdomen. He was transported to the hospital where he died from his injuries. And at the scene, detectives found a .40 caliber shell casing and a small amount of blood. Police say surveillance video shows Lowe arguing with Tett and his friend inside Billy's Lounge. And the altercation moved outside, followed by a gunshot, and that's the direct quote from the court document. Then the court documents recount Tett's friend retelling the night, but then we get to what Tett told detectives. In an interview with Tett, who you're now seeing on the screen, court documents say Tett admitted to having a prior history with Lowe as they both had a dating relationship with the same woman. But Tett says he did not know Lowe was at Billy's Lounge when he got there. And while in the bar, Lowe apparently approached Tett, which started the argument. Tett told investigators Lowe punched him once in the head, stunning him, and that's also a direct quote. He told investigators that he feared for his life and shot Montanez Lowe. And that's, again, also a direct quote. Tett is facing 1 count of homicide, open murder, 1 count of weapons, firearms possession by a prohibited person, 1 count of weapons carrying concealed, 2 counts of weapons felony firearm, and 4th-degree habitual offender. If convicted of open murder, he does face life in prison. And on June 2nd, a man was unintentionally shot and killed at his home in Muskegon. Neighbors say 72-year-old Robert Ritter was at his home on Gyrock Street in Grand when a car full of young kids shot and killed him. And police say he was not the intended target. The neighbor told me she's now scared to live on her own block.
Stephanie Hapson was sitting on her front porch with her husband Monday night, looking out onto Gyrock Street in Muskegon.
And I see somebody stick their hand out of the window and go, pop, pop. I wasn't thinking that they're actually shooting at this house and they killed a 72-year-old man.
She witnessed the shooting of her neighbor, 72-year-old Robert Ritter. When police arrived, they say they found Ritter shot in the torso. Ritter died at Trinity Hospital.
I paid attention to see that it was actually a gun. And then he had it sticking out of the back seat of the car. So I'm like, so he's really just shooting in the air like that.
Hapson says Gyrock is not a quiet block.
But I've only stayed here 2 years. So, and I've seen these shootings out here already since I've been here. And this street right here is horrible.
She says the violence she's seen over the past 2 years on the street is making her want to leave. And she's been in Muskegon for over 4 decades.
I don't know. I don't even want to live in Muskegon no more, but it seems like anywhere you go, there's shooting happening.
She says Ritter welcomed them to the area and invited them to go to events.
He's a good guy. He don't bother nobody.
Hapson believes the shooter and the other people in the car were young, a pattern she sees too often in the community.
It's a big issue, especially when you have teenagers just coming around just shooting guns anywhere. I mean, even if they're just shooting it in the air, it don't make a difference. You shouldn't be shooting no guns anyway. And then you killed somebody. Yeah, that's really sad.
Muskegon police are still investigating the shooting.
And as of this taping, Muskegon police have not released any update if they have a suspect in custody. And on May 9th, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department sent out a release saying a 19-year-old Grand Valley State University student was shot and killed at an off-campus party, and that was on May 9th. A Jenison man is now facing a charge accused of shooting a gun through the floor of the house and killing the student. I talked with the Sheriff's Department on how to stay safe while using a firearm and how even if you don't intentionally shoot someone, you can intentionally set off a gun.
After almost a month, a young man is charged in the unintentional shooting death of 19-year-old Connor Lauderman. 20-year-old Weston Muhlenberg was arraigned Thursday morning, facing a charge for discharging a firearm in a building causing death.
And he was working with investigators. We were working with him.
The Ottawa County Sheriff's Department says on May 9th, Muhlenberg was at a house party in Talmadge Township when Muhlenberg got a rifle and fired over half a dozen shots through the floor of an upstairs bedroom. One of the bullets shot through the floor, hitting Lauderman in the head and killing him. In court documents obtained by 13 on Your Side, detectives say Muhlenberg admitted he was the only one who fired bullets through the floor and he had accidentally hit someone.
You know, it's legal to possess and own firearms here in the state of Michigan and throughout the country. You know, we just ask that you do it responsibly. And
Captain Jake Sparks with the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department says while the gun wasn't intentionally fired at Lauderman, the gun was intentionally fired. He says when a gun is fired, it opens up the possibility for something tragic to happen.
in early May during this incident, there was numerous people at the residence. You know, just can be a dangerous situation to introduce a firearm into that setting like that.
The Sheriff's Department believes alcohol was a factor in this incident, and while he says alcohol and firearms certainly do not mix, a lot of the rules for safe gun handling apply in any scenario.
1, always assume that every firearm is loaded. 2, don't point that firearm at anything unless you intend to shoot. 3, be aware of your target and what's beyond your target. 4, don't put your finger on the trigger till you're on target and ready to shoot.
He adds to never use drugs or alcohol prior or during shooting, and it's illegal in Michigan to carry, possess, or use a firearm while under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Muhlenberg can face up to life in prison if convicted. And coming up next, a preschool teacher facing a judge after embezzling more than $200,000 from a Rockford preschool. But she says she still loves the preschool. And that's next up on the docket. A Rockford preschool bookkeeper could spend up to 2 decades in prison. She entered a no contest plea to embezzling more than $200,000 from the school. And in court, the judge says the woman was using the school as her personal pocketbook.
$224,502.17. That's how much money Kent County Circuit Court says former preschool bookkeeper Susan Caxitz embezzled over 7 years, and the amount that landed her 1.5 years to 2 decades in prison.
In thinking about what it would take to engage in this behavior, it's pretty diabolical.
Rockford police say the fraud was uncovered after the director of St. Peter's Lutheran Preschool notified police that between March to May of last year, there had been 4 fraudulently deposited checks totaling over $17,000. 50 incidents of embezzlement were found through further investigation, all linking back to an account Caxitz owned. During sentencing, her attorney told the court Caxitz had, quote, medical things in the past that could have impaired judgment.
This is not based on any kind of animosity toward the preschool or the church or anybody there.
Caxitz used her time in front of Judge Christina Mims to apologize to the preschool.
Love preschool. Like, I stayed that long because I love preschool. If I've caused heartache, would definitely apologize for that.
But Judge Mims said Caxitz was using the preschool's money as her personal checkbook.
Essentially duping the people that entrusted you to be the bookkeeper for this school and for this money for these kiddos.
Caxitz has to still pay over $200,000 to the preschool.
A former volunteer basketball coach at Ottawa Hills High School in Grand Rapids was taken into custody accused of sexually abusing a teenager. 22-year-old Charmin Eubanks, you're seeing on the screen right now, is facing multiple charges, including 3 first-degree criminal sexual conduct charges. Court documents show the girl was under the age of 16. The investigation started in December when the teenager's mother called police, and the sexually abusive relationship allegedly began in September and lasted until November. The charges all stem from instances when Eubanks gave the student rides to and from school and practice, court documents say. Investigators first learned about the relationship when the girl's mother called police in December 2024, and she said she found out through an anonymous tip on Facebook. Grand Rapids police detectives then interviewed Eubanks, and the investigators say he denied the relationship and acted as though he did not know the student. But Michigan State Police gave Eubanks a lie detector test, and in the court documents it said he did not pass. Investigators interviewed the student. She recalled multiple instances where Eubanks pulled over his car and sexually abused her. Detectives say with this new information, Eubanks, quote, reluctantly admitted to the sexually abusive relationship. And a spokesperson for Grand Rapids Public Schools tells us Eubanks was not a district employee. He did pass a background check before becoming an athletics volunteer. Coming up next, I'll take you inside the courtroom to a sentencing of a 20-year-old who hit and killed a man after driving high and drunk at 6 in the morning. The sentencing of Joshua Bommersheim is next on the docket. On June 2nd, a man was sentenced for a fatal drunk driving crash on US 131 that happened back in August 2024. 20-year-old Joshua Bommersheim will spend minimum 4 years in prison for the crash that killed Tyler Robinson. Before we get into the sentencing, let's take a look at what Robinson's parents told me back in August.
He really embraced everything that he could do, which is admiring.
Yeah. I'm very proud of him.
Next thing you know, the vehicle that had, hit them, and that they said that Tyler's injuries, were instant, and that
Blunt force trauma.
6 o'clock in the morning that somebody would be drinking under the influence of drugs, and that early in the morning.
When he left home, we called him our Greyhound Gypsy, because he was always taking the bus whatever state he was going to.
Yeah, he was brave at that age. Dream is that we'll be able to, take his remains up there and
to Alaska.
Give him what he wanted.
Investigators say Bommersheim was under the influence of alcohol and marijuana when he left for work around 6 a.m. that day. Police say Bommersheim was driving a pickup truck southbound when he hit Robinson's SUV, which was disabled on the shoulder of the road. The prosecutor says Bommersheim's blood alcohol content was 0.152, over twice the legal limit. Appearing virtually in court, the Robinsons, as they live in Virginia, say their son was taken in a selfish act.
For us, there's no words to express our sorrow, anguish, and heartbreak that my wife, our family, and I carry every day. On August 14th, 2024, 292 days ago, our lives were changed forever. Our son Tyler was taking us from a selfish act, a deliberate decision to get behind the wheel under the influences of drugs and alcohol. That conscious decision ended a life. It ended our son's life. Tyler was crushed to death. His body was left lifeless on the side of the road as a result of a decision that never had been made. The image of how he died is something that no parent should ever have to live through. It was preventable. This devastating act of destruction has left our family broken. I was 600 miles away in Atlanta to attend my sister's kidney surgery when I received the call. I had to call my wife to tell her our son was gone. You hear her screaming over the phone, something that always lived with me. I have to call my children, his brothers, his sister, to tell them the unimaginable news.
The prosecutor says this case was personal for him, asking the judge to sentence Bommersheim to the top end of the guidelines at 57 months to 15 years. He says the recommendation was not one made lightly and that this was an irrevocable loss to the Robinson family.
He must be held accountable for that decision. We must not forget that a man is dead, his children are growing up without a father, his partner suffers physically and emotionally, and his parents will never hold their son again. The court must send a clear and resounding message that impaired driving that leads to death will be met with the full measure of justice. The top end of the sentencing guidelines is not excessive, it is proportionate, it is warranted, it is just. So for that reason, Judge, we ask this court to impose this minimum sentence of 57 months in the Department of Corrections.
During the sentencing, Bommersheim's attorney, Donald Sapino, says he recognizes the grief the Robinson family is going through, but says his client made a mistake that everyone has to deal with for the rest of their lives.
He's a young man that made a mistake that cost you, your son, and my client both dearly. He should not have got in his vehicle and driven. He did not drive home from a bar. It wasn't 3 in the morning. Doesn't take away the pain, the sorrow, and the negligence, but he did, as he indicated, go to bed, sleep, and get up. That goes to show you that he had been drinking too much for too long and should have stayed home from work that day.
Bommersheim then had the opportunity to address the court, where he talked about how this is a decision that will stick with him for the rest of his life, along with his hopes for his story to save others from making the same decision.
There are no words strong enough to express the sorrow and regret I feel for the pain I caused on August 14th. Every single day since, I have carried the weight of that moment. Not a day passes that I don't think about Tyler or the unimaginable grief that Mr. and Mrs. Robinson endure because of my actions. I offer my deepest and most heartfelt apologies to them. I took something that can never be returned, and the guilt of that is something that I'll carry for the rest of my life. I also want to apologize to my parents, my family, my friends, and my former employers. They have all stood by me, worried for me, and supported me through this nightmare. This disappointment in myself is something that I don't take lightly. Since the crash, I've made it my mission to live differently. Carrying this guilt has broken me, but from that brokenness, I have found purpose. I've committed myself to becoming a better man. I consistently attend AA church, early recovery, and relapse prevention throughout the week. These programs aren't just routine for me, they are the sources that will help me redeem myself as best as I can. I will continue this work inside prison and long after. I need to use what I've done and what I've learned to help others. I want to prevent other people from making the same terrible mistake, specifically by raising awareness about driving in the morning after drinking. Through recovery and faith, I begin to change. I've shared my story hoping that even one person might think twice before they hurt someone. I've been humbled and helped by a community that believes people can change, even people like me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I may never deserve it. I am asking for a chance to keep growing, to better my mental health, and keep honoring Tyler's memory through all of the strives of good, regardless of the mistake that I made before.
Judge Margaret Baker calls these types of cases, driving under the influence involving death, one of the worst things the court sees in the courtroom. And Bommersheim has to serve 4 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections, but could spend up to 15. And that's all for On the Docket. Thank you for joining me on this episode on 13 Plus. We have new episodes releasing every week, taking you into the courtroom for the latest updates and deep dives on crime in and around West Michigan. In the meantime, we will bring you the latest on crime in court, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. And when breaking news affects you and your community, we stream live on 13 Plus with what you need to know right when you need to know. We'll see you next time with updates on what's on the docket.